Good evening, and on behalf of the Auxiliary Committee of the Order of Malta Federal Association USA, it is a pleasure to welcome you tonight. We are very and truly grateful that you have taken the time to be with us for what promises to be a very meaningful and inspiring conversation. This evening, we have the privilege of hearing from Christy Wilkens, that we all know. And Christy, whose deeply personal and faith-filled journey is beautifully captured in her book, Awakening at Lourdes, How an Unanswered Prayer Healed Our Family and Restored Our Faith. As we prepare for the upcoming international pilgrimage to Lourdes, tonight's event offers us a valuable opportunity to pause and reflect on the spiritual significance that sacred place and special moment for all of us, members and volunteers of the Order of Malta. The Grotto Lourdes has long been a source of hope, healing, and renewal for countless pilgrims. All of us that goes there every day, every year, we know how special that place is for us. And tonight we are invited to consider more deeply what draws each of us there, whether physically or spiritually, and how such journeys can shape our faith. In the gentle yet powerful presence of our Blessed Mother, we are drawn into a mystery of love that is at once tender and profound, a love that leads us always to her Son. Our Lourdes, as at Nazareth and at Calvary, Mary invites us to surrender our wounds, our unanswered prayers, and our deepest longings into the Immaculate Heart, trusting that no tear is lost and no suffering is without purpose in the greater divine plans. Beneath her mantle, we learn again the language of faith, to say yes in the darkness, to hope against hope, and to believe that grace is quietly at work even when heaven seems silent. And that happens so often, but anyhow. In her presence, we are not merely comforted, we are transformed, drawn ever closer to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, where true healing and restoration are found. Following the presentation, we will have time for discussion and questions, and I encourage you all to engage openly as we explore these themes together. Thank you again, and I leave the floor to Mary Kate, that will be our host for tonight.
Again, good evening. How to build on that beautiful introduction. I'll just simply say that whether you're preparing for this year's pilgrimage or simply here, to learn more in the hopes of serving on a future pilgrimage, I think Christy's reflection will provide a really wonderful opportunity to reflect on encounters with the sick and the call to faith and service, and how the pilgrimage experience can really deepen vocation and prayer long after the return home. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Christy Wilkens. So Christy Wilkens, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you for the beautiful introduction, and Domenico especially for reminding us about really what we're trying to do here and why Lourdes is so special and so important, both in our lives and also in the world. My name is Christy Wilkens. I am a dame in the order and a registered nurse, and my husband Todd is the hospitaller for the Central Texas region. So we've been involved since our first pilgrimage with our son Oscar in 2017, which is one of the things I'm here to talk about tonight. Are the slides shared, Mary Kate, or do you need me to put them back up? Are you all able to see them now?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'd like to share a few key episodes from my book, which Domenico mentioned. It's called Awakening at Lourdes. But what I really want to tell you is kind of the meta story around our family's experience of pilgrimage. And I hope it will be interesting to you because it has multiple layers. So this is really different from the talks that I usually give to people who aren't familiar with either the Order of Malta or the Lourdes pilgrimage. And I'm really excited for the chance to reflect more deeply with all of you on those aspects tonight. So let's begin at the very beginning. On May 6th, 2016, our infant son, Oscar, who is our beautiful, seemingly healthy 5-month-old boy, he's the youngest of our 6 children, he had the first of what would eventually be countless seizures while he napped in my arms at a Mother's Day retreat. Exactly 1 year later, God lanced and healed those wounds on the Order of Malta Lourdes pilgrimage. As you know, that takes place the first weekend of May every year. And so that date is going to be really crucial to what I'm going to share with you tonight in the way that God has sort of threaded our story through that same square on the calendar. 1 year after that, I returned to the grotto as a volunteer this time, and I brought my daughter, who's our third child, Oscar's sister, Miriam, and she made her first Holy Communion in the grotto. And several years after that, there was a long COVID time in between there. I returned to Lourdes for the third time, and this time I returned as a dame in the order and as a registered nurse. So I am now a member of the medical team and the Lourdes International Medical Association. And all of that is really the culmination of a call that I heard on that very first pilgrimage with Oscar. So this year will be my fourth pilgrimage. Some of you may be first timers, and some of you I know are veterans with more silver and gold crosses than I will ever earn. But it's not that uncommon for Malads to return as volunteers or even as members of the order. But I think I might be one of the only people who actually went back to school and got a whole new degree so that I could serve on the medical team. So today I would like to talk to you about Lourdes and about change, especially in the light of Holy Week and Easter. So I shared each of those snapshots so that you could kind of see the larger arc of our story. The part of the story that I share in the book was really only the first step of the rest of our lives. That book was published in 2021, and I wrote it shortly after the 2017 and 2018 pilgrimages. So in the book, I cover that long, hard year between Oscar's first seizure and my first Lourdes pilgrimage with him and my husband, Todd. And then also a few months afterwards, which were really disorienting, but also very glorious because I was learning to walk in faith as Oscar's mother in all these new and different ways that I had thought were impossible before that first pilgrimage. So in the book, I'm talking about the story of rebirth after loss and trauma and sadness. And that's really a story of healing and a story of the many miracles and graces that we received in 2017, even if none of them was really the miracle that we went there for. But I shared these pictures in order because I wanted you to see something. Lourdes changes you. It's brought me from being this scared, furious mom to a mom who's still scared a lot, but less furious and trying to be more trusting. And a mom who's also now a nurse who's serving other families who are in that same wilderness. So the cross that I started with in 2017 that I begged to be taken away from me is still the same cross, but the way that I carry it is what has changed. Lourdes also changes you in a different way each time. You leave with something new. You leave with some piece of your story being written into the book of your life that wasn't there before. And there's always some call to action. We're always called when we come home to live out our vocation more perfectly. It's never the same pilgrimage twice. But before you leave, you arrive different. Lourdes changes a different you each time. So you and all the volunteers and all the Malads and clergy, we arrive bearing new wounds, new scars, new ideas, new triumphs, and we bring those to Our Lady and to our Son. So each year you may be more or less vulnerable. You may be more or less receptive to the graces, more or less giving to those around you. And the great thing is that Our Lady and her Son work with whatever you happen to bring them in that moment and no other moment. So let's start with what the Malads might be bringing. Here's a short excerpt from the book to kind of give you a sense of where my head was on pilgrimage number 1 with my sick, suffering, undiagnosed, but very disabled son. And this is a moment when we were processing with our team on the way to the baths on Friday afternoon. With each step, my legs felt heavier and my arms tightened around my chest. I was so tired of being hurt, and I could not bear to be hurt anymore. I could not bear for one more dream to be crushed, one more avenue to healing closed. All around me, people were chatting and laughing. I withdrew, thinking scornfully about what an absurd little parade we were. What was there to be so full of joyful anticipation about? Had we actually flown to France to touch some dirty water from an overcrowded spring in the hopes that it would have some impact on the way our baby's neurons fired. That idea was patently nuts. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. Why were we even here? So that was my state of mind for the first half of our pilgrimage with Oscar. I was broken, sad. I was trying the very last thing I could think of to try, and I was almost too tired to go on. So if you want to think about this in the arc of the resurrection story or in the arc of life stories, your Malades might be in their Good Friday. For a lot of them, the trauma is very recent and it is brutal. Maybe they've moved into Holy Saturday, where life can feel a little more empty and cold and devoid of the meaning or direction they thought that it once had. Your Malades might be carrying anger, abandonment, grief, confusion, doubt. Sometimes you might get the very spiritually advanced Malade who immediately and joyfully accepts the cross as God's will for their life. That wasn't me, but I know it does happen for some people. But I promise you that someone who was in the airport lounge with you on Wednesday, April 29th, will be feeling at least one of those darker, more complicated feelings, either about their faith or about God. And it's really, really important not to skip this Good Friday step or gloss over it. For many of us, whether we're first-time volunteers or returnees, the airport is a really happy reunion with all these friends that we haven't seen in a while, and the air is thick with this really boisterous energy. Remember that your Malades have never done this. Most of them have never met any of these people. Many of them are sick, they're tired, they're weary, they're sad. And that might be true even if they also have these large dashes of anticipation and gratitude and joy. Trauma-informed care is a relatively new idea in healthcare settings that shifts the patient care focus from the usual question that we like to ask when we're feeling nosy, what's wrong with you, to what happened to you? And we do this in an effort not to re-traumatize patients in the process of trying to treat them. We don't want to stomp all over these wounds that are so fresh and so tender. So in religious spaces, we might think about this as a shift from, can I pray to fix you? And that has definitely happened where I've had someone walk up and say, can I lay hands on Oscar and pray for his complete and total healing? We want to shift that mindset to something that's more like, can I wait with you? Can I be in your garden of Gethsemane? Can I stay in this uncomfortable, unknown place with you? And it honors the dignity and the reality of the Malade's wounds, just as we venerate Christ's wounds on Good Friday without rushing to Easter. So remember, especially during those first few days of the pilgrimage, that your Malades are still in the middle of their passion story. They haven't reached Easter yet. We're not going to rush the process. Let's wait with them. So when we checked in for departure, when we entered the baths, we had spent 12 months trying every medical cure. I had literally flown my son across the country to New York City and nothing had worked. We were grasping at straws. We were chasing miracle cures now. I was basically just testing God, even though my faith was in a shambles. So it's really impossible to overstate how much people were trying to love me in those first few pilgrimage days and how much I refused to let them. The important thing for you as volunteers to know is that they let me not let them. They offered, but they didn't insist, in the same way that Christ will knock, but he doesn't enter unless he's invited. About halfway through the pilgrimage, after I had taken Oscar to the baths and he had not been healed, our small reflection group of parents who had accompanied child Malades, we read a meditation together on the gospel story in Luke chapter 5. So as you can see in this picture, it's the story of the paralytic man whose friends lowered him through the roof to be healed by Jesus because the crowd was too dense to reach Jesus any other way. We have to rely on community, explained the chaplain. Again, this is from my book. We must make ourselves vulnerable to others in order to be healed. The paralytic in our story was only saved by the faith of his friends. The community bore him forth to Christ, and it was their faith that moved Jesus to act, not the man's. He couldn't have gotten there on his own. We don't even know if he wanted to go. Maybe he was angry and yelling at them to stop the whole time. Maybe he didn't believe Jesus could heal him. The Monsignor who was leading our group paused to let that soak in, and then he pressed us one step further. Was he even ready or willing to accept his miracle? I wasn't ready at first, but that scripture meditation, which happened after the baths, was a real turning point for me away from Good Friday and toward Easter. So our first miracle of that first pilgrimage was that by the end of the pilgrimage, those really steady, patient volunteers of the Order of Malta who just sat with me in the Garden of Gethsemane had been instrumental in my miraculous healing. My stony heart had been replaced with a natural heart. My anger was gone. My distrust was gone. And I was confident again in the love of God and the Blessed Mother for me, for my son, for our family. Christ was alive in me again in ways that I never expected would ever happen again. So let's talk about the volunteers now, the second movement of this symphony of change. So we as volunteers might actually be bringing our own wounds, our own baggage, secret malades, I call them sometimes. But the forward face that we're bringing is usually one of expectation and of joy. We already know that the Lord is alive and present, and we are learning to recognize and to announce his presence in each other, in the body of Christ, in the church on earth, and we are energized and ready to serve. But the most important act of service, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is witness. We've heard it said over and over again that the volunteers serve as the hands and feet of Christ on the pilgrimage, and this is absolutely true. Those corporal works of mercy really do matter. You are feeding the hungry, you are giving drink to the thirsty. And that's important because in their lives at home, malades often feel really isolated and cut off, even from their regular communities. Their friends might disappoint them. They don't know what to say or do when someone gets a hard diagnosis. They might stop visiting or calling. And so sometimes the simple act of breaking bread together in community can in and of itself be a really powerful healing experience. But I really want to focus today on visiting the sick, on the gift of presence. The malades offer the gift of their wounds, serving as a model of Christ crucified. Their journey is to learn to receive love, just as Christ received love in his utter weakness during the Passion. But as you can see in this picture, though, we as volunteers serve and honor Christ in our malades with our loving gaze. We turn our eyes to the Christ that is present within each human person. We see them with Christ's eyes. And we also see them with the human eyes that we use to adore Christ in the Eucharist. In his encyclical De Lexite, Pope Leo wrote, "We must feel bound to invite everyone to share in the light and life born of recognizing Christ in the faces of the suffering and those in need." And there are some really special places on earth, and Lourdes is one of them, where all of the mundane details of our everyday lives are stripped away, and we experience an encounter with living icons, with Christ in the flesh. Another mother from our 2017 group with Oscar told us all on her last pilgrimage day about how her son, who was a malade, had completely blossomed under this gaze of love all week long. Instead of being seen as the sum of his diagnoses and problems or this long list of black and white issues, he was just seen. He was seen as a child of God. He was seen with the eyes of Christ. And by the end of the week, being seen had healed his heart. That example of others simply gazing with love upon her child had made it more possible for this mother to see her child in this way too. And if my own experience is any indication, seeing even one person in this way makes it more possible to see everyone. By the end of the pilgrimage, the malades who had come with us were beginning to be witnesses to the volunteers who, like I said, brought their own stories and their own pain. And they were able to step across that line because of the love that they had already received through the gaze of the beloved turned upon them. This is a really wonderful quote. I meditate on this one a lot. It's from a doctor who worked at Calvary Hospital in New York City, caring for terminally ill patients who might otherwise have been offered assisted suicide. And he said, "The main way we suffer is emotionally. There's a sense of abandonment, the absence of love. Emotional suffering can only be treated by love." So this hospital treats about 6,000 patients per year, and after 24 hours in their hospital, Nobody asks for assisted suicide. So this is especially for any volunteers who are not on the medical team. This witness, this presence, this love is your #1 mission on this pilgrimage. Just like the apostles in that first Easter season, your job is to recognize Christ when he meets you on the road, by the water, in the breaking of the bread, and to just stay with him. So far, we've talked about two sides of the same coin. We've got Malads receiving the love, the volunteers giving it. Each is recognizing Christ in the other until by the end of the pilgrimage, those lines get really blurry. And all of that happens in the space of one short week. So what happens next? As I mentioned at the beginning, Lourdes changes you. You bring a different self to the grotto each time. You encounter Christ in a different face each time, and the Lord sends you home with a different mission each time. I heard the call to become a nurse. I heard in my head God tell me he wanted me to become a nurse on our first pilgrimage with Oscar. So this picture, I actually didn't know this picture was taken until one of our later pilgrimages. I ran into a friend who had been with us in 2017, and she's like, "Oh, I have this great picture of you." I am having a small nervous breakdown in this picture. This had literally just happened. God had been like, "Oh, by the way, I would like you to redirect the course of the rest of your life." I don't know why God occasionally speaks to me in complete sentences like that, but I think it's because I'm unusually dense and that's the only way he can get through to me. But I was not ready at that point to hear that call. So I went home and I told God that that was a really silly idea and also no thank you. And I came home in May 2017 and I started writing instead. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. There's another great quote from St. Bernadette, which is, I think, in various places in the domain, where she says, "I am entrusted with telling you what I've seen and heard." And so that was the call that I answered after that first pilgrimage. I finished a manuscript about our pilgrimage with Oscar. And then I could not publish it. Nobody wanted it. I tried everything. I submitted it all the places. And for years, it just sat on the shelf. In 2018, the next year, when I went back to Lourdes as a volunteer with my daughter as a page, and she was also one of those secret Malads that I mentioned, I brought a new and a different self. And my only prayer, my only intention for myself the second time was to ask God to confirm whether he really wanted me to be a nurse. 10 seconds after I took this picture, this Malad behind my daughter asked me if I was going to be a nurse because he thought I'd make a really good nurse. So I came home and I did that. And my third trip to Lourdes in 2024 was not just as a volunteer, but as both a dame in the order and a nurse. When I look back now and I follow that May 6th thread through Chronos and Kairos, through our earthly time and God's time, I can start to perceive what God has been doing. So here's how it started. And if you recall, I was really unspeakably devastated when we walked out of the baths on that first pilgrimage and my son had not been healed. Spoiler alert, he actually was healed on that pilgrimage. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't complete, but he was healed enough that every single one of his doctors and therapists was amazed when they saw him after we came home. I talk more about that in the book, but today he's 10, he's walking, he's thriving, he's a total rascal. But the larger story is really about all of the new paths and communities that God invited us into in the years since May 6, 2016. My husband and I were both invested in the order. I got that nursing degree. Someone did eventually want that story I wrote down. Oscar has learned to walk. He's received his first communion. He met Pope Francis. I have no idea what God is going to ask of me or of any of you this year, but I will warn you that you would probably better buckle up. Jesus doesn't leave his apostles in the upper room after Pentecost. He sends them out into the world to do hard, impossible, beautiful things. He sends them out to build the kingdom. Lourdes changes you, and through you, Jesus can change the world one encounter at a time. So here's the book, and y'all are very lucky. It's actually on overstock clearance right now at Ave Maria Press. So if you'd like a copy, you can buy it directly from Ave for $4. But it's also available at most online booksellers, Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Happy to take questions. Thanks everybody for your time.
Christy, I'm just gonna, well, first, a profound thank you. I'm really so grateful to you for sharing such a beautiful reflection with us this evening. I have a question for you. I'll kind of kick things off. But before I do that, I'll just say to the group, as I ask my question, as Christy replies, you can feel free to send your own questions like directly to me through the chat. You can select my name in the to drop down, and I can pose it on your behalf, or you can unmute and ask as we kind of wrap up. I kind of where to begin. I have a number of questions that I could pose, but I think the one that feels most top of mind for me, you observe that the Malads at home kind of often feel isolated and cut off from the regular communities. And one of the things that I love most about Lourdes is the way kind of the world is turned upside down, right? The sick and the suffering are at the very center of pilgrimage life, rather than being on the outside looking in or trying to negotiate a world that's not considerate of them as they do at home. And I want to say, maybe I give Elizabeth the credit for this. I feel like I remember this from last year's farewell dinner, where you mentioned kind of the way that we spend the week living in Christian community, the way that God intended. So all this to say, it's like, that's so very good, but pilgrimage ends and we come home to a world that is not built that way. So how do you find or build something like that community in ordinary life? And how do we enact the graces of Lourdes when we return, or even if we haven't been, like, how do we build that world here?
That is a really, really good question. And I think it's something that gets easier the more you go to Lourdes. So I will encourage you to go back over and over again. But transitions are hard, right? And the regular world is not like Lourdes. So one of the tricks that I learned after that first pilgrimage, I think it's very easy for Malads especially to get kind of defensive when they reach that closed off point in their medical journey. They make so many decisions. They're in so many weird places where their friends don't go. So when people offer to help, it's often this kind of nebulous, like, oh, let me know if you need some help. And the knee-jerk response is something like, no, I got this. And I think that's true for us as volunteers too. Like, there's this myth in modern society, and especially in modern American society, that we have to have this all together and we are self-sufficient, autonomous individuals who are in charge of our own destinies. And I think one thing that's really beautiful about the Lourdes pilgrimage is it shows us what a falsity that is, and what a paltry narrative of human anthropology that is, right? So the simplest answer I have to your question, Mary Kate, is just to say yes when people ask if they can help you with something. It's really awkward and uncomfortable, but I think part of being in Lourdes is recognizing all of the places where we are vulnerable and we are weak and where we need to be met and loved by Christ. And most of the ways that we get loved by Christ in this world are through the hands of other people. So I think there's a call toward honesty and like radical honesty and vulnerability when you're struggling with something, and a humility to be able to say yes and accepting the gifts that people are trying to offer you, even if they're maybe not the ones that you were expecting or asked for. The flip side of that is sometimes we worry about infringing on the rights of others, right? We see someone is suffering. We're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. It kind of doesn't matter. What matters is that you try. Can I get you a cup of coffee? Hey, can I come by and fold a load of laundry for you? I mean, Elizabeth, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, having just had some recovery happening, but it's really hard. And it's not common for people to actually participate in the exchange of gifts in the regular world at home. And so my challenge for all of you after you come home is to find the places where you can either say yes or say, can I help you? If you want to read more about this, I know I want you all to read my book, but after you read my book, there's a really amazing book called The Dignity of Dependence by Leah Libresco Sargent. She's a Catholic convert, and it's basically all about these questions about how we build up this false model in our heads that we all have to be independent, autonomous agents, but that what the Christian life is really calling us to in everyday life are these small acts of vulnerability and humility and giving and receiving. bring your leftovers to your best friend's house for dinner, have a potluck, just call and say, hey, do you want to do something right now? And maybe the answer is no this time, but maybe it'll be yes next time. And just the act of asking is an act of witness, is an act of seeing the person as someone who is worthy of love and a beloved child of God.
Yeah, it sometimes feels so impossible to recreate what we experience while we're in Lourdes here at home. But when you kind of lay it out in that way, it feels so much more accessible than it might otherwise.
Well, and we can think too about how the apostles must have felt coming down out of the upper room and then having to like go into the world and do this stuff. So lean into that discomfort too. Like it's not going to be the same as it was in Lourdes. It's not going to, you're not going to be able to replicate it, but you're supposed to be taking a tiny spark of it and leaving it everywhere you go.
So yeah, I've been to Lourdes a number of times, but I've never been in things like the companion talks or whatever. So something that really resonated to me was like what you were saying about the story of the paralytic and how it was the friend's faith, etc. Is I feel like I would like to kind of capture some of these things to share with folks. Because I think that that speaks to a lot of stuff that, you know, it's difficult to get across, even our veteran pilgrims, right? It just means I hope I don't have to go on that side of things, you know, but I want to still be empathetic. And so I just wanted to, one, thank you for sharing that story. And if there's any other perspectives like that, I think those are the ones that resonate the most. I have definitely seen people open up over time, and I feel like at some point on Saturday is when things kind of flip. Our Malades are always the center of our pilgrimage, but you start to see that the pilgrimage becomes about the companion who's been trying to be so strong. And so whatever, particularly if the Malade is a child, but also if they're an adult. And so they start to then feel like they're not alone in going through this and trying to be supportive, but they're also hurting too. So anyway, I just having a little bit of a glimpse into what the companion lunch talks on Saturday are like. I think that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to have been able to experience Lourdes in so many different ways, like so many different ways.
You can relate to so many more people when we go each time.
Right. But the point about the faith of the man's friends, I think, is one that really bears repeating over and over again. And especially that line, like, we don't even know if that man wanted to go. They might have kidnapped him. And that's kind of what my state of mind was at that point too. Like I was not able to pray for myself anymore, but I was surrounded by a community of 400 other people who could.
Christy, in the spirit of offering perspectives that are unfamiliar to many of us who have gone on the pilgrimage, I think about the medical team experience. You went from entrusting your child's care to the volunteers and medical professionals around you to then being the one providing that care for someone's child, spouse, or sibling. And that's like a really profound shift. I'm really curious how being on the medical team specifically has changed the way that you experience pilgrimage. Are there things that you understand now that you couldn't from the other side, perhaps?
Yeah. I love serving on the medical team and I love being a nurse, but I will say I miss the mystery. I think that if you're there as a non-medical volunteer, there's kind of a veil. And it's a really important veil because it allows you to encounter the person in front of you as a person and not as a patient. So one of the things that's been challenging on the medical team is like, we get to see all of the data, all the medications, all the medical history, all the records and everything for the Malades on our team. And so the challenge then becomes, how do I still think of them as a human and not as the sum of their medical record? I hope that my prior perspective is able to help keep me grounded in that. But I do kind of have some jealousy now about the non-medical volunteers who don't have to try to bridge that gap. It actually took me most of the pilgrimage to realize that Oscar's team had no idea what was wrong with him. And I can't really emphasize enough how much of a gift that is, because most of the time at home, these Malades are walking around as cancer patient or seizure disorder. And there's none of that in Lourdes. So on the medical team, there's a little bit of having to hold that tension and struggle with it. The companions are still doing the bulk of the medical care. They know their Malads, they know them inside out, they know every inch of their routine. And so I think of the medical volunteers more as a safety net and as much of witnesses as the rest of the volunteers are. You know, I'm privileged and I'm grateful to be there to do that so that the Malads can be safe. But so much of the medical heavy lifting is done by the families.
Your mention of that tension that the members of the medical team hold and have to kind of navigate as they move through the pilgrimage reminded me of another kind of tension that you mentioned. And I think it was the idea of the secret Malad, the volunteer who may be on pilgrimage and carrying some sort of unknown suffering with them. And I'm so curious to think about, that probably resonates with people who are listening to this conversation. How do you think about being the one who serves and also the one who needs some kind of healing? Like, what does it look like to stay open to your own wounds and whatever healing may be available to you, while also being like immersed and present to the work of the pilgrimage? I often think of some things that I've carried on pilgrimages over the years, and I just kind of put them away so that I can do the work. Yeah.
I think as a parent, I do a lot of that work in my everyday life. Like I have to be a mom and be responsible for my own soul, but I also have these children that I have to watch out for. And in some sense, that job is bigger than the job of me, myself. So I think there's a little bit of that mindset where you have to be able to engage your brain on two different levels at the same time. When there's ever a conflict, though, we're there for the Malads. And so I think you're right, Mary Kate, that there are moments where we might be experiencing or on the verge of experiencing something really profound and deep, but the Malad is calling. And so we can think about that kind of in religious or monastic life, like the bell rings, it's time to put this work away and turn to the work that God has for me here. So I think, you know, it's such a gift and a grace that we get to experience all of the same spiritual milestones that our Malads do. And I think it's also a gift that we hold that lightly for ourselves and we're ready to set it down at any moment. And that's not to say that our wounds and our vulnerabilities and our needs aren't important. And I bring a stack of intentions to the grotto every year for myself and for my friends and family. But the graces that we receive on this pilgrimage are as much about our service to the Malads as anything else. And often the healing that we need for the things that we bring comes directly through that service. And so keeping that mindset at the forefront and being ready at any moment to answer God's call, if he's calling through your Malad, is the thing that helps you as a secret Malad with whatever it is you're carrying.
In these last few minutes here, I don't see any questions in the chat. I have a final question, but I wanted to give anyone who's listening the opportunity to share or to pose a question if they have one.
Christy, as a parent of a Malad last year, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your own testimony and witness, and so much of it just resonated really deeply from the lens you hold as a caretaker and as a mom and just as your own relationship as, you know, daughter of Christ. And so just thank you for your vulnerability and the impact that it really does have on the people who are able to listen and to receive it.
Thank you so much. Are you going as a volunteer this year?
No, but it is like very much on my husband's list of things we'd love.
Yeah.
And feel so honored to be able to serve in the same way that our daughter was cared for. It was pretty, I could go on and on, but hopefully someday.
Okay. I'll pray for her.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I'll just ask my last one, which is just about your vocation. Like, at what point did your vocation to become, I imagine it intersected with your Lourdes experience, but your vocation to become a dame in the Order of Malta. Like, what did that discernment look like? And your husband, Dad's also a knight, and how does that shape your family life?
that was a much simpler discernment process. I think it was really born out of the joy that I experienced on the last half of the pilgrimage. Really, by the time we were at the airport ready to go home, I was already talking to our team members. They're like, so tell me more about the order. How do you get involved? What do you do? And I knew that I wanted to at least come back as a volunteer. When I came back that second time, I was already a candidate. And I think that the work just flowed so like my cup was so full at that point, I had to do something with it. I had been given so many gifts and so many graces on that pilgrimage that I knew that it wasn't just for me. The order in Central Texas, we're kind of like the scrappy underdog region. It's really been a slow burn, slow growth. Which is, it has its challenges, but it also means that it's been a very intimate period for me. Like the formation was very intimate, the service projects were always very intimate, and it allowed me to get really deeply involved very quickly, which helped my discernment a lot. It really shapes so much about our family. Prayer life and sort of rhythm. Like so much of our year is built around the Lourdes pilgrimage now, or the Texas retreat and things like that. And I love that we've gotten to bring each one of our kids as a volunteer at some point. Our oldest daughter will be coming this year, and she's our last one who hasn't been yet. And to see the way that the Order of Malta and Lourdes in particular are bearing fruit in their lives, and the way that God has worked through the Lourdes pilgrimage in their lives is so humbling. And it really helps us as parents to be able to point to those moments and say, like, see, God cares about you. God loves you. So I'm just so grateful to the order, both, I mean, obviously for the gift of the pilgrimage in the first place, but for the gift of this whole new faith journey and the way that it has just transformed everything about our prayer and our service. It was so far beyond my wildest expectations when we got on the plane in 2017.
Well, speaking of getting on the plane, I'll be seeing you and a number of people on this call in just 2 weeks, which is so exciting. I can't believe it's almost here. I want to say thank you, Christy, for speaking with us this evening and for answering these questions. And for the gift of your book, which I really encourage, and I can follow up with a link in email to everybody who attended, just to make sure that you can find it on Ave Maria Press or on Amazon. It's such a wonderful testament to your faith and to your family. So thank you for that as well. Thank you to the audience for joining us, for being with us on this Wednesday night. Like I said, looking forward to seeing a number of you in 2 weeks. But if you're not making pilgrimage this year, I would just ask that you pray for us and for everyone traveling to Lourdes, and know that we will carry prayers for you to the Grotto. And with that, Domenico, if you have any parting words.
Just grateful to all of you attending tonight during a weekday, and grateful to Christy for a beautiful talk, and Mary Kate for the beautiful organization. Again, as I second everything that was said by Mary Kate, and I'm gonna add, if you have any special intention that you want to share with us, if you're not able to come, please share it, and we will pray for your intention. So thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you, and we hope to see you at the next appointment.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's great seeing everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Margaret, honey, pull up your pants.